I am working from the labors of a very small group of largely unheralded scholars who've been working in this field.
Well, Robert, I got to stop you there. We're going to commercial, but coming up, much more with Robert Spencer talking about his book, Did Muhammad Exist? Don't move. And welcome back. We're talking to Robert Spencer about his new book, Did Muhammad Exist? And Robert, one of the things that really caught my attention in the book is what the earliest Christian and Jewish records say about the Islamic conquerors. Tell us about some of that.
Well, the funny thing is that they, in the first place, never call them Islamic conquerors. Yeah. They say the Saracens came and laid waste, or the Hagarenes, or the Ishmaelites, or the Muhajirun, but they never call them Muslims. They never say that they came with a religion that they said was superior to the religion that we have, and they never mention a book or a prophet. And this is an extraordinary silence when you consider that this is supposed to be the motivating force for why they're conquering in the first place.
So where did it come from? The whole Islamic narrative, Muhammad is their prophet, the Quran is their law.
The whole thing was built starting in the 690s and accelerating in the 700s, and especially in the 800s when we start to get all the biographical material about Muhammad. But it started in the latter part of the 7th century, and especially in the 8th, among the Arab leaders who had amassed this empire. And in those days, there were two great powers in the world, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. And both were multinational, multi-ethnic empires that were held together by a common religion. The Byzantines were Christians and the Persians were Zoroastrians. The Arabs came out of Arabia and conquered all this huge expanse of territory, and some of them were vague Abrahamic monotheists, some of them were Christians of various kinds, some of them were pagans and polytheists, and the Arab leaders developed Islam in order to give their empire a unifying force. And this is one of the reasons why Islam is political, belligerent, authoritarian, supremacist, violent, intransigent, and intolerant, because it was designed to strengthen an empire and to be a political force for cohesion. It was political first and religious only secondarily.
Yeah, and arguably it's the same way today as well.
Precisely.
Yeah. What's been the response to this book? Very provocative, of course. Like I said jokingly, too hot for TV, but I'd imagine a lot of people are running away from this book right now.
Well, it is too hot for TV, Eric. You're the only one who has the courage to deal with this on TV.
We're honored to have you on anytime.
And I appreciate that. Most people in the so-called conservative media are afraid to deal with it, and I think that the leftists and the Islamic supremacists are hoping that if they ignore it, it'll just go away. There was one very funny Muslim writer for a site online called Religion Dispatches who roundly condemned the book and said it didn't make any sense and it was terrible, and he did it 2 weeks before the book came out. He actually hadn't seen the book. He was working from the press release, and the press release was enough for him.
How is this going to affect the discourse? Do you think it will affect the discourse? I know you hope it does. But do you think, look, that this will possibly affect the conversation about Islam and what we're up against right now?
I have every confidence that it will, Eric. I mean, there's such a debate right now about whether Islam is political or religious. The anti-Sharia laws being considered in various states are being struck down by liberal activist judges on the grounds that Islam is purely religious and not political. And so I'm saying Islam was from the beginning political and not religious, and I'm hoping that that will have a great impact. Also, we are in the process of translating this book into Arabic. It's going to be made available as a free PDF online everywhere we can put it, and we're hoping to effect a tremendous transformation in the Islamic world itself.
Yeah. What has been the Muslim response, if any? I know you mentioned the one critic.
Fury and contempt.
Yeah.
But nobody has dealt with the arguments. I actually had a very interesting debate on the Aramaic Broadcast Network, which is abnsat.com, by satellite to the Islamic world and online in America. And I debated, along with David Wood, Anjem Chowdhury and Omar Bakri, two jihad leaders.
We've had Chowdhury on this show.
Yes. And they said, of course Muhammad existed. It's in the Quran.
Yeah.
And that was the extent of their engagement.
If it's in the Quran, it must be true.
There you go.
Although it's interesting because Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran.
Not once.
Yet they say that Jerusalem is their third holiest city. Pretty
Well,
interesting.
that's all
Although it's
cobbled
mentioned
together.
hundreds of times in the Bible, both books.
Yes, it's in the Hadith. Jerusalem is mentioned, but the Hadith is the traditions of Muhammad's words and deeds, as we have been discussing. They don't come around till the 9th century.
Yeah.
Well over 100, 150, sometimes 200 years after Muhammad is supposed to have lived, suddenly we know all about what Muhammad said and did. It's legendary material that has no more value than the stories of Robin Hood and Friar Tuck and the Merry Men.
Well, I think I know where you stand, but coming up, we're going to talk more to Robert Spencer. We're going to wrap it up with Robert, and we're going to ask him, okay, he's written the book. What's his take? Did Muhammad exist? That's coming up. Stay tuned.
Do you want to know the truth about the jihadist in your backyard? Then be sure to pick up my book, The Terrorist Next Door: How the Government is Deceiving You About the Islamist Threat. Available wherever books are sold from coast to coast.
And welcome back. We're wrapping up with the author of Did Muhammad Exist? And Robert, what's your take, man? After all this research, painstaking, did Muhammad exist?
No. As the prophet of Islam, as the man who was the warlord and the pedophile and all these different things that we are so familiar with after dealing with Islamic terror, there's just no record of him at the time when it would have clearly been there if it had existed, if he had existed.
And this is after meticulous research, and you've been doing this for 3 decades. Wow. It is fascinating stuff. I recommend the book to everyone. Did Muhammad Exist? An Inquiry into Islam's Obscure Origins. Robert Spencer, he's also the director of jihadwatch.org. And don't forget Pam Geller's book, Stop the Islamization of America, a practical guide to the resistance. Well, that's all for this week. Until next time, from Stackleback on Terror, take care and God bless.